Unfiltered news and opinion for the citizens of Idaho. Get more true news by visiting trueidahonews.com. If you'd like to support this podcast, visit trueidahonews.com/support. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everyone. Shane Klaas here with True Idaho News. And folks, if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the Idaho legislature, it has been to say the least, a wild and crazy few months. It all started about a year ago, but things have been just going off the rails. And I know a lot of people are asking a lot of questions. A lot of information is coming from different sources, different people, different places. And everybody's got something to say about it. But folks that haven't said anything to say about it are in what's known as the Gang of Eight. They haven't said a lot until just recently about what's going on. And so if you're not familiar, there's been a little bit of a riff in the Conservative Party, and we're going to get into where that riff came from, how it started. We're going all the way back to the beginning, folks, and bringing ourselves up to current so that you can get a better understanding of why this rift is occurring. And I know there's just been so many questions, and people have been asking me, and online I've read into the different comment sections. There's been posts. These people are saying these legislators are saying bad things about these legislators. Those legislators are trying to defend themselves. And it's just been a mess. And this is not what we voted for. This is not what we wanted as Idahoans. We had a phenomenal election cycle here a few years back, and it looked like we were taking over. The true conservatives were finally taking over our Idaho legislature. We were finally making some headway. Christy Zito was about the only good senator that we had for a long time. And then suddenly we had multiple seats, and it just looked like everything was heading in the right direction, and then crash. All of a sudden, things went off the rails. And it's been discouraging to see. It's been discouraging to watch. And I know a lot of people have questions. So what we're hoping to do here today is to deep dive in and answer those questions. And if you're watching this right now, I'm going to ask you just to go down and hit that like and share button. Get this out. I know every single podcaster, every person you see doing a video asks you to do that. Well, there's a reason, because it tells the algorithm that you're interested in that. And then what it'll do is start sharing it out to people who are like-minded, who are like you. And there's so many people asking questions. I think it's really important. I never do this, but I think it's important that you do that right now for me. Just hit that like and share button, get it out there, because today I have Senator Zuiderveld and Senator Zito on the show, and they're coming on right now, and we're going to unpack things. So, Senators, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Shane. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm doing really, really well. I'm just really happy to be here today to answer your questions. And it's been our policy to just walk the high road and do the work of the people and not get mired down in all of this stuff. But then there comes a point where you just can't just allow your friends to be disparaged to that level.
Yeah. So, let's start on a happy note. There was a lot of good that came out of the last legislative session in Idaho. Why don't each of you just kind of share a couple bills, a couple things that you thought were extraordinary, so that we're not just a Debbie Downer today. We want to, there is some hope. Okay. And the hope is God is in control, and that he is, he's watching, he's involved. And when we listen to him and when we follow what he wants us to do, then we get good results. But as we've seen, when sometimes we lose faith and we get a little scared, bad things happen. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But share some great things. Let's start on a good note.
Well, I guess I'll go first. I just want to point out too that we've had the most conservative session this year. and the word is that it's the most conservative session in the history of Idaho. And that is because the conservatives did stick together on policy. We were not divided on policy. Every single one of us was needed to bring forth what you are seeing, and the citizens are benefiting from that. And so I just want to make sure we point that out, that we were not divided on policy at all. And the other thing, I was mostly on JFAC and on health and welfare, and JFAC is Joint Finance Appropriation Committee. And so that was a huge learning experience for me to see exactly where everything's at. But I have to say that we did do a few where we were able to cut back on some of the enhancements, even though our budget has grown still more. But we did in that committee were able to stop some. And on the House side, they were able to basically vote down some of those bills and bring it, that we had to bring them back to JFAC. And that was because the conservatives did stick together. And then on health and welfare side, we did get the Medicaid expansion that passed because we all stuck together. We have an ivermectin bill, we have a health freedom bill, and those were because we all stood together on policy and got those passed.
Yeah, wonderful. And how important that ivermectin bill was. And I know that those who maybe haven't followed some of the health benefits that are there, that was, I think, one of my favorite ones to see. Especially, I know that during COVID, and I thank God that we're out of the area where we can actually talk about this now without it getting knocked down and taken off of social media. But my experience was when I got COVID, is the second that we started on the ivermectin, within 24 hours, it just kind of tapered off. It didn't necessarily bring things down, but it stopped the progression in its tracks. And we all lost friends during that period of time. And if it weren't for the politics, we wonder how many of those people would still be here with us today. And I've got a couple of them that are just at the top of my mind as I'm thinking about dear friends that were lost during that period of time. So thank you guys for making that happen. Christy, what wonderful things do you have to share that came out of there? What sticks in your mind?
Well, I would just have to echo what Glenneda said. People want to focus on this so-called rift, how conservatives are picking on each other. And, and I would submit to you that there's a lot of picking on that's been being done, but that picking on has been being done by a very, very small group of people. It's not a general thing. And it's very, very unfortunate because it was a good year on the legislature. I mean, in my time in the legislature, I think I only saw two funding bills, appropriations bills ever get killed on the floor. One was a vindictive act against the then Lieutenant Governor, and the other one I think was the Secretary of State's bill got killed once. Other than that, I did never see the kind of action on the budgets that happened this year. And to me, that's huge, because the most important thing we have to do there, second to protecting liberty and freedom, is to be very judicious in how we spend the taxpayers' money. Because if you're working hard to pay your taxes and support the state, then you can't work hard to support your family and take care of your needs at home. So, it was a good session, and the conservatives held together, and there were huge advances made and really, really good things done. And so it's unfortunate that outside of that, we've had to take time away from doing the work of the people, even in the off months, to deal with this kind of petty, childish, I'm looking for really clean words to use to describe
Nonsense.
Kindergarten type playground nonsense.
Yeah.
So, I'm just here to answer questions today. Whatever you want to know, ask, because I'm just going to tell you from my perspective, and of most of the people involved in this, I probably have more years in the legislature Even when I didn't serve, I lobbied. I was there because I lobbied for the Second Amendment Alliance, and I wasn't one of those bad word lobbyists. I lobbied for the people for the Second Amendment Alliance. So I was still there. I
Yeah.
still was engaged and involved.
So I think that's the important thing for people to know coming into this is that it's really there's a rift that's in the conservative movement and caused by individuals that aren't necessarily true conservatives, but when it comes to the voting on the policies, for the most part, everybody has managed to put their personal pettiness aside and vote appropriately when a bill makes it to the floor. The challenges, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, in my perspective, and as we deep dive into this, correct me if I'm wrong, but where it's affecting things is by kind of stopping the Gang of Eight and the conservatives from being able to bring bills to the floor. But as bills are brought to the floor, then everybody's voting the right way for the most part, which is why we had such a great session. But hasn't really been a riff on policy as much as it's been a riff on personalities. And that's really the sad thing, is that we're letting personality issues, conflicts. This is to your credit, Christy, playground politics at play, and it's like elementary school level playground politics. Well, I don't like what you did, and I don't like what you did. Well, I'm not going to let you talk anymore. No. And it's this kind of stuff that's going on, and it's just, I mean, it's sad. So, but I think a good place to start any story is to go back to the beginning, so anybody who hasn't been following this can kind of come up to speed. So I think, Christy, you were going to kind of do this. Just give us a little bit of a history. Now, bring us up to David Levitt sent an email to all three of us, and I'm going to go through that email. But why don't you bring us up to this point? Just kind of the history of the conservative movement, maybe. And so we know who we're talking about and how we got here. And Glenneda, if you have anything that you want to chime in on, feel free.
Okay, well, I can go back to, when I was elected. I was elected in 2016, and my first session was 2017. And just prior to that, Ron Nate and Heather Scott were basically the only two conservatives, real hardcore conservatives in the legislature. And of course, they took the heat for that. Sometimes they were the only no votes on the floor on bills that, on budget bills or bills that cross the line as far as preserving and protecting your freedom and stuff. And then in 2017, it was kind of like last election that we had Priscilla Giddings was elected, Carrie Hanks was elected, I was elected, Brian Zollinger was elected, and the conservative movement grew, and it grew in a great way. And so very early into that session, I think it was January 16th of my very first session, Heather Scott was removed from her committee assignments. And so in a show of solidarity and support for her and the people that she represented, she was at that time Legislative District 1, Ron Nate, Dorothy Moon, Carrie Hanks, Priscilla Giddings, and I stood up on the floor and asked to be relieved of our committee assignments until full representation was returned to the citizens of Legislative District 1. And, that was huge. That I don't know that ever in the history of the Idaho legislature anything like that had happened. But we were solid in our commitment to the people of the state. And I could not see myself, it wasn't anything really planned. It was just kind of a spontaneous thing that, we're going to stand up for this. And so Brian didn't stand up with us that day, but Brian was solid, on so many other things. And so we became the 6-pack plus one. And there were memes done on us. One that I remember especially was, I'm not a Star Wars person. I'm a Star Trek person, but I'm not a Star Wars person. But it was our heads were put on Star Wars cartoon figures. And Dorothy Moon was in white and she had a lightsaber, and we were all on there, and we were the 6-pack plus one. And we were then what the Gang of 8 is now, which is kind of cool. If we've gone from 6-pack plus one to 8, who are willing to take that hard stand. So that's kind of how it's been. And we all took hits along the way. Ron Nate and others in the House stood up over 30 times to ask for grocery tax repeal, to have tax bills moved to the amending orders, to have the grocery tax repeal put on it. It was just our job to defend the will of the people. Priscilla Giddings asked for a 40. See, when bills are read across the floor in the House and the Senate, the Constitution says they should be read 3 times in full. Well, by unanimous consent, we don't do that because it would take so much time, which on one hand wouldn't be a bad thing, but on the other hand, it just takes up a lot of time. See, when we present bills on the floor, we always ask unanimous consent that they appear to be read in the journal, but that we don't. Well, Priscilla Giddings asked to have a 40-page bill read across the pulpit. It's not a pulpit, but across the lectern on the floor, in protest of, I don't even remember now what was happening. But, we were fearless, and confrontational politics is how you move the ball. I've done a lot of work in the Second Amendment arena, and confrontational politics is how you move the ball. Because if there's no consequences for either taking bad action or not taking action, nothing gets done. And so that's kind of how it worked up until then. And then we saw all these other conservatives get elected. My last year in the Senate was tough because I stood up for grocery tax repeal and stuff. That's not why I retired. I retired because I've seen that the longer you serve, the harder it is to not move moderate, and the more difficult it becomes to not want a seat at the table bad enough that you'll compromise your principles.
Yeah. I'm looking at this picture, and I remember as things were moving along, the 6-pack, which became the 6-pack plus one. But as you look in there, you see, right in the middle, you've got Ron Nate, and he's now heading off the Idaho Freedom Foundation, which is taking a lot of heat now because of this riff that's going on. Which is sad because of the hard work that Idaho Freedom Foundation has done, and people don't understand this, and I take every opportunity that I have to explain this to people. Idaho Freedom Foundation does not rate legislators. They go, wait a minute, but they got legislator ratings. They rate bills. And those bills are rated on a very defined matrix, and that matrix is, does it increase freedom or decrease freedom? Does it increase government, decrease government? Does it increase spending, decrease spending? That's all they're looking at. And so when before anybody ever votes on a bill, Idaho Freedom Foundation takes a look at the bill, and then they read through it, and they rate it based on that matrix. Then what happens at the end of the legislative session? They just look at all the different legislators and say, okay, how did they vote on each of these bills? The bills have already been voted on before, or rated before anybody knows how anybody was going to vote on it. And at the end, they just say, how'd they do? And then that's how that matrix comes in. So if you go to Idaho Freedom Foundation, you look at it. I know people get mad. A lot of legislators like, well, they Idaho Freedom Foundation, they skewed things. They just don't like me. Well, no, actually, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the bills. And then it's just you score yourself based on how you're voting on those. So I like to make sure that everybody understands that when we kind of dig into that side of things. But Glenneda, looks like you had something you want to say.
I do. I was wanting to share, when I was looking at that picture, I started really getting involved in politics around 2016, and just the local politics, because I figured that's something that, I could change. But those people are what motivated me to run. I thought, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of fighting for Idaho and making sure that we stay conservative and don't become the next Colorado, California. And their stance and watching them. I spent years watching them before I ran the first time in 2018. Just their boldness, and I learned a lot from them. So a lot of things that I do today is because I've learned from them, and they've actually mentored me. And I just, it's been a great thing, and it's been a motivating thing. And then I think that has caused a lot of people to want to run and grow that conservative movement. And then with Idaho Freedom Foundation, that scoring helps when you're out campaigning. You can go out and show how they're voting, so that we can start looking at how are they doing. Not, because everybody's nice, they're great neighbors, but how are they voting on policy? How are they working for you, the citizen? And so the Idaho Freedom Foundation was a huge tool in helping every single one of us get elected.
I think that's what makes this so hard to watch happening right now. Is as I look at this picture right here, I see people that I over the years with have become friends with through Shane Talks Politics and doing what I'm doing here, and I see some people that as individuals I love, I really truly love as individuals, but now that there's personalities involved instead of we just talking about policy. I think that's what makes it so bad. I mean, some of the worst fights that you ever see, I hate to say it, are between a husband and wife, right? Because they love each other, and so then the feelings get involved, and when feelings get involved, feelings get hurt, and when feelings get hurt, then you have two different choices. You can say, okay, my feelings are hurt, but if I remove my feelings from this and I just look at the logic, let's look at the logic behind this, and make logical decisions, then usually things can get resolved. But the problem is people make emotional decisions, and then they lash out back emotionally, and that hurts the other person's feelings, and then you end up with this elementary school level playground fight. And it's people that are the worst fights I've ever seen are the closest of friends or the closest of people, and this is what I think we're seeing happen right now. But so this is kind of where things started. This is where everybody started and built up to where we have was the Gang of Eight. And then, I mean, it continued to grow. There was probably 15, 16 good solid legislators that we're talking about right now that came in, and we should be running the board right now. We should be completely, and I say we, the conservative movement, should be completely in control of everything. But Satan sees this happening. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm talking Bible. I'm bringing that in for the people that are out there watching, and some of you are going, "Oh boy, here we go." But here's what happens: united, they get things done, and that's something that and we start bringing our state back to where it ought to be. But that's not where Satan wants us. He wants us divided and split up, and that's exactly what started happening. And we start seeing this, and it started with just some lack of faith. Is in some of those areas that brought us here. But as things go, then you get divided, and now there's some turmoil going on. Where did this start?
Well, it started with the Idaho Freedom Caucus, the original Freedom Caucus that we were all part of. There was 15 of us. 12 of us were public members, and then we had silent members as well. And we started out strong and working together. I mean, we had some bumps along the way. That's with anything when you're trying to figure out your teammates and how each other works and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And then it started when in our second term, or second session of my first term, when Rachel Hazlitt signed up to run against Mike Moyle. And our caucus on the House side was having meetings and discussing how they were wanting to endorse Moyle, because they were worried that if we didn't get him back, we would have Megan Blanksma, like you had said earlier, as the Speaker of House. And as a caucus, we don't endorse anybody. Individually, you can do that, but as a caucus, we couldn't do that. And so that's kind of where the rift started happening. And with my comment on that is, why would we endorse somebody who would never become a Freedom Caucus member because of his scoring and how he votes, especially on spending? The Freedom Caucus, the state Freedom Caucus, one of the main things, they don't tell us what to do. They ask, what can we help assist you in making your state sovereign and great? But the one thing they really want us to do is make sure that we're not growing our budget and stop the dependency on federal spending. That is their number one thing that they stand firm on. That's something they won't move on. And so that's kind of how we became, and that's where the rifts started within the very beginning, was that they were wanting to support that over Rachel. And then it goes further, and because we were all Hazlitt members as well. And Hazlitt members is the political division of Young Americans for Liberty and Make Liberty Win. Hazlitt is the political side of that. And so all of the Freedom Caucus members were also Hazlitt members. And when they decided that they were going to be supporting Moyle, they started putting out what we call conflict, the confrontational politics. They've been putting out negative mailers, which we all get. We all get those. That's just part of politics. And so when they started going out after the Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle, then the Hazlitt members sent a message to Hazlitt saying that they really needed to back off, basically cease and desist, because we want to have them there. And you'll see on the screen there where there was a letter written. So everybody likes to point that the rift started when they did a negative ad with Julianne Young. They did make a mistake there. They did. But if you look at all the good that they have done, every single one of us that's in Hazlitt, every one of us that is a conservative, we had received assistance and help from them in our elections, because it's hard going up the big corporate lobbyists. It's really difficult. So we've had that help. And so every single one of us was part of Hazlitt because of the help. But now that they were doing a negative mailer towards Mike Moyle, they wanted him to cease and desist. Later on, you'll see a letter that they signed that I end up signing, because I didn't sign that one because I thought it's not my place, not my business to get involved in that. Mm-hmm. And so the next letter that was signed, I end up signing my name because the pressure that was being put on me, that if I didn't sign the letter or go along with it, I would be targeted with a lot of negative, campaigns. And at that time, I was already, talk about confrontational politics. I was already having a lot of confrontational politics from our own governor through his PACs, directing $100,000 towards my campaign. And so again, where's the outcry on that? As far as, yeah, this is, out of state, all of your groups that are like that, Citizens Alliance, y'all, State Freedom Caucus, Tea Party, all of these groups are national groups that are not actually in state. And then they have directors within the state. And so they're always making this outcry and yelling at y'all for what they're doing. But where is the outcry for those who were actually getting attacked by their own Republican governor? And so, that's kind of where that went. But and now I can't even remember what the question was, but how we got to this point. And so that's kind of where it all began, is because we were getting into the personalities and we were trying to control who the next speaker was going to be by making sure he got elected. And who's to say that, if he didn't get elected, that, and with all the conservatives coming in, that they didn't get somebody like Heather Scott maybe being the Speaker of the House. Yeah. They could have done, and I just think that that is where the rift started.
So let me, well, by the way, everybody, we noticed that Christy's kind of popping in and out here a little bit, and that is because she has a family member that's getting ready to leave, and we knew before that she was going to pop out just for a minute to say goodbye. So this is, we have families, and that's how this goes. Now, because that little pop out right there, I think a couple of these is going to call, a couple of our screenshots is going to call Christy Glenneda and Glenneda Christy, because now it's changed places.
Oh,
This is through Zoom.
should I will close my video again and see if it puts us back.
See if it pops
It
it back
will.
over. That'll be okay. We'll just work our way through it, and we'll survive it. So, no.
Did it fix it?
What happens, Glenneda, if you pop yours off real quick, just turn the video off on the bottom and back on? Will it scramble you back around?
Stop video.
And then start again. There, now we're all straight. Okay, all the
Okay,
rest of the show will keep going.
let me
Sorry, everybody.
explain
Some of the
how-
technical fun of doing this, but hey,
Well, it is. And my granddaughter stayed with me last night, and she's getting married soon. And so they're going to get a fitting on the wedding dress, and I'm doing this instead of going to the fitting for the wedding dress. So I had to at least say goodbye. And then my dog
Absolutely.
was out the garage, and she was out in the front yard. So, but you know, we're just people, and
Yeah.
I think it's so important. That's so important for us to never, in all of this, never lose sight of the fact that, you know, we're all human beings, and we're
Yeah.
all people. We have families, and we have lives, and you know, debate me on policy.
yeah.
Don't attack
Yeah,
personally.
and that's it. And family members see this. So,
Mhm.
so here's what I want to do. I want to recap really quick. So we had a little bit of a rift that started when this is through Young Americans for Liberty, and HAL, which is their pack. Am I getting this right? I want to make sure I'm saying it.
Yeah.
So
Make Liberty Win is the pack. Mhm.
Okay. So, so the members of the Idaho Freedom Caucus, which was about how many people would you say
15.
now? About 15
It
people.
was 15.
Some of them wanted to back Mike Moyle, and they wanted to back Mike Moyle not because anybody felt that he was the best pick for the job. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to recap this and shorten it down for everybody watching and listening. Not because they thought he was the best pick, not because they thought that's where God was saying he needs to be the best pick. They were saying, well, if we don't vote for him, we might end up with somebody worse as the speaker.
Like Megan Blanksma. To be exact, the words were, Mike Moyle is better than Scott Becky, and if we don't get him back in, we'll end up with somebody like Megan Blanksma.
What a low bar
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
compare with. And I said it, not you, but that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Scott Bedke, what a low bar to set. Well, he's better than him. Well, that's like saying, well, anyway, we're not going to go there. So anyway, so this is where kind of the rift started, is that then some of you said, oh, slow your roll here. You know, what happens? We might get somebody better.
Yeah.
And
that was my constant comment is, what if we get somebody better? You know,
Yeah.
we, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let everybody run their campaigns. And again, like I said, there is, confrontational politics. That's how it all goes,
Yeah.
and when the attack ads come, and even the ones that come out, and we'll get into that later, but the ones that came out, when we're trying to fight for the grocery tax and the pay raise, and, it's always been confrontational politics has helped us move the needle further to the right. And I like to call it accountability politics, not confrontational politics. And sometimes you have to put the heat on. And that's what actually helped us here in the Magic Valley. It wasn't because we were just sweet and nice to get along, to go along and wait our turn. We use confrontational politics here locally to do what we've done here in the Magic Valley, and hopefully we'll grow it.
Well, without the confrontation, I mean, the Bible even says iron sharpeneth iron, right? It's through two swords striking each other that it gets sharper. The Bible doesn't say there's not going to be any controversy, that there's not going to be any riff, if you will. In fact, it says that the Bible is sharper than a two-edged sword. So, and that it will pin mothers against their children and vice versa. So, I mean, that's just when you stand for something, there's going to be controversy. And when you stand for something, you have to speak out. Otherwise, that's what we send you there for, is to say, hold on a minute. Maybe we shouldn't spend $5 million on a toilet seat over here. Instead of just going, oh, well, we just want to get along. We don't want to have any controversy. We send you there to be bold and to speak for the people. And the people, if we had a voice, if everybody showed up, everybody in the Magic Valley showed up to the State House, we'd see some controversy break out. So,
well, they would be upset, and they should be upset. But, and what happens is it's always compromise. We have to compromise. Incremental politics, we have to compromise. But give me one example where we've actually moved the needle further to the right by compromising.
Right.
Maybe the incremental compromise is good for the time being. When we look at the Medicaid repeal bill that we passed, the original bill was going to save $100 million. I shouldn't say the number, but it was a large number. And then it passed through the House, and then it got held up in the Senate. Well, they were already working on another Medicaid repeal bill that was going to basically save taxpayers half that amount of money. So they compromised, and he says, well, to get it through the Senate, we have to do that. Well, they didn't even give the Senate a chance to do that. And being on health and welfare, we had the votes to get that baby to the floor and then have the whole body vote on it. But because of all the politics and the compromising behind, they says, well, we can try for a little bit more next year and a little bit more next year. I haven't seen where when they do incremental politics like that, in my little short time, I haven't seen where we won't see that next session, because it's an election year. And so we need to go for the full thing, and then just have that ability to let people see where we're at. So the Senate never had a chance to vote on the better Medicaid repeal bill. And I actually tried to bring that up in committee, which was met with a lot of disgust and anger and pulled behind in the hallway, trying to get that brought up into committee so that we could actually vote on it.
Okay.
But that compromising, that's what's happening with all of this. We have to compromise. We want to get our bills heard. We want to do this. And I'm thinking, let's stop compromising. It's a slow fade when we give ourselves away. We're
not compromising on should we spend $1,000 or $1,200. We're compromising on principle, and that's where there's problems. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because we do have some slides coming up. But so back on the riff in the Liberty, the Freedom Caucus, Idaho Freedom Caucus, I do have the letter that some of them sent, and I want to read this just so that you can see we're not just going to bring up stuff without bringing the receipts. And I want to read this for you. It says, "Dear Young Americans for Liberty," this was on April 13th of 2024. "We, the undersigned, our current Idaho legislators and current Hazlet members who are concerned about potential plans or attempts of this organization to publicly or privately mount a campaign to unseat Representative Mike Moyle, the current Idaho Speaker of the House. We believe Speaker Moyle presently offers the best opportunity for Hazlet members and conservative legislators to continue to make inroads into getting more liberty-minded people into the legislature and into key decision-making roles within the House." And I'm going to pause for a second and say, this is where, if you go back to the video I did with Greg Pruitt recently, he talked about access politics versus controversy. So this right in there, that you can see where they're headed with this, is that getting more liberty-minded people into the legislature and into key decision-making roles within the House. They wanted access. They wanted those chair positions. We also believe losing Rep. Moyle in the primary election will create unnecessary chaos within the Republican-held House and greatly hamper our efforts to keep Idaho a red state and a beacon for liberty and freedom. We are currently witnessing this issue dividing our conservative base. With 9 Hazlet members fighting to stay in office, we believe this is a misdirection of resources and a strategic error. We value the relationship we have with y'all and appreciate you hearing our concerns on this important issue. We hope you will take this into consideration. And then here's the signers. Now, folks, I want to bring this up. I want you to take a look at who signed this. We have Scott Herndon, who's no longer there. We had Senator Phil Hart, Heather Scott, Dale Hawkins, Ben Tooze, Josh Tanner, Joe Alfieri, Tina Lambert, Elaine Price, Brian Lenny, Tammy Nichols, Chris Trakel, and Senator Kerry Bajert. So this is where, okay, we want Moyle in there. Not when, you know what I didn't see? We want Moyle to stick around. We want you to support Moyle because he's been strong on this and this and this and this and this and this. Had nothing to do with the bills that he brought, what he's done for Idaho, all the great things that he's done. Had nothing to do with any of that. You know why? Because he has like a 60% score. They couldn't talk to that. What they wanted was access to chair positions, access to power, and also the fear that they might get a worse person in there than Moyle. But I mean, we already set the bar at Bedke. How much worse can it get? And so
Shane,
that's the concerns.
Quickly too, it's important to remember that the Republican caucus, because they're the majority, they elect in an election before the session starts. They elect the speaker. So if it went from bad to worse, that would be because the Republican delegation in the House voted from bad to worse. You know,
Right.
they had other options. They could have done a Heather Scott. There were a lot of other conservative options for Speaker of the House. It's not like it was Moyle or a Democrat.
Right.
I point that out.
And just to that point, so here is Idaho Republican Platform scorecard. This is how they rated Mike Moyle, by the way. And I guess since I'm going to bring them up, I probably ought to, just so that we're on the same line. Let me really quick. I also think it's important that we're going to be talking about this Idaho scorecard. So I guess I should read this really quick, and just so that everybody knows how they rate things as well, because we talked about IFF for a minute. So this is Stop Idaho Rhinos, and Stop Idaho Rhinos created the Idaho GOP platform scorecard, and so you understand how they rate the legislators. They don't. Again, they rate the bills, but it's not them that's rating them. So if you take a look here, it says a little over a week ago, we unveiled our legislative scorecard. We rated 316 bills, which was every bill that was voted on in either the House, Senate, or both, within the exception of the bills that received unanimous support or opposition. What we did not tell you during that unveiling was that our scorecard is 100% AI generated. There are no emotions or feelings or thoughts in this. So for several years now, and we and others have tried to rate bills with AI. We failed each time because AI wasn't there yet. It couldn't properly analyze the Idaho GOP platform and then compare the bills to that platform until now. So they're not rating the bills. What sets them apart from IFF is that they're not rating the bills based on the metrics of, does it increase or decrease freedom? Does it increase? Well, it kind of does, but I'll get on that in a minute. Or does it increase or decrease spending? Does it increase or decrease your freedom? What it's rating is, this is the Idaho GOP platform and what they stand for. Now, how are the representatives of the GOP voting? Are they voting in line, or are they voting against the GOP platform? And so it compares that. And then they said we were finally able to successfully train AI to do both, read the platform and then compare it to each bill. And not only that, it could challenge its own rating to make sure it got right. So while we don't get into specifics on how we did this, we can promise that the AI rated each bill very accurately because we had fail-safes, including our AI training. Why AI? If you've been paying attention to the legislator and the legislative analysis and ratings across the nation, has been the Idaho Freedom Foundation. They do solid work for Idahoans, but because they've been so over the target, they've been repeatedly accused of rigging the ratings to make some legislators look good, others look bad. They rate the bills prior to each vote for all to see beforehand. One would think it would be much easier to rig if that rating happened after the vote, wouldn't it be? Either way, with AI, the human emotions and bias are taken out of the rating process. So anyway, I don't want to beat that to death, but the way that they rate, no humans are involved in it. This is the Idaho GOP platform, and then this is how they rate. And so that, based on that, that's how they ended up with the Idaho with Mike Moyle receiving a D. And by the way, here's your Idaho GOP leadership. Kelly Anthon has an F. He's voting against the Idaho GOP platform more than he's voting for, well, at 52.6%. Okay, so about a 50-50, half the time he's voting against the platform. Same with Lori Hardog. Mike Moyle, barely over 50% of the time, votes for the Idaho GOP platform, so he's voting more like a Democrat. And Jason Monks. So these are the people that they're fighting to keep in there, that they want access to. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I want to point out, now that you're talking about the platform, when Dorothy Moon was elected chair of the Idaho Republican Party, one of the things that she ran on, and something that was very, very important to her at the time, was the fact that as a party, and I was on the resolutions committee for quite a while, and I was actually chairman of it a couple of times, but we would spend all this time on these resolutions. They would start, and this is true grassroots government, because the central committees are made up of elected officials from every voting precinct in the state, everyone. And then they go to a central committee meeting, and then there are legislative districts, and then there are regions, and then then the legislative level. So you have this grassroots movement, and we would spend all this time on these resolutions that are supposed to be direction to the legislature on what the people want. And Dorothy was sensitive to the fact that, we spend all this time on these resolutions and then nothing happens in the legislative session. And there were some of us that when a bill would come up that was actually something that was in the resolution platform, on the floor, we would debate, this is one of the Republican Party platform resolutions. We should all vote for this as Republicans. But when Dorothy became the IDGOP chair, she said that she was going to have designated liaisons between the legislature and the party that she could work with to get legislation through. And I think this right here has caused as much problem between all of these factions as anything. So just before the last legislative session, at the summer and the winter meetings, grocery tax repeal was one of the resolutions passed, and then the resolution was passed that the legislators would reject the pay increase. Now that came from the people. That was a grassroots, bottom-up request from the people, the Republicans of this state, through their central committees, through their legislative districts, to those meetings as direction to the legislators when they got into session. So I brought the legislative pay raise rejection bill, and that right there started probably more trouble than anything in all of this mix, because the designated liaison, Josh Tanner for the House, voted against rejecting the pay raise. Glenneda supported it. And I'm not saying this to choose sides or anything here. I'm just laying out the facts of what happened here. And there was no support from the IDGOP for either rejection of the pay increase or getting rid of the grocery tax. And I think that has caused as much trouble as anything, because that kind of, I'm not sure what word to use here. I want to say alienated, but that's not the right word, right? I think you get what I'm trying to say.
I do. Glenneda, do you have anything you want to add?
I agree with Christy, and being the Senate liaison, that is part of the job. And this is my second term being the Senate liaison. I was a Senate liaison my first term, and one of the resolutions that was brought forth by the Idaho GOP was to stop ranked choice voting in Idaho. Dorothy was very active with that. She got it through the House, through the Senate. She worked with us to make sure that we were pushing it, very, very involved in doing that. And then what we're seeing in this next year with all these resolutions that we brought forth, there wasn't a lot of involvement coming from the chairwoman of the GOP party. I'd never seen her. She never called about it. And that's kind of what is disheartening is because we started out strong in the first term, but something changed in the second term as a Senate liaison, where all of a sudden she's not supporting these platforms, these resolutions that the party had put forth. And so that there's that. And that, as far as the liaison, that's part of our job, or at least that's what I was told, that we have to do everything that we can to help pass these, to get other Republicans to make sure, this is a Republican platform. This is why we should vote on it. And that's part of the job. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case on this resolution.
Yeah, what I have here is the Republican platform, and the preamble, I think, just kind of outlines what they stand for. They believe that the strength of the nation lies with our faith and reliance on God, our Creator, the individual, and the family, and that each person's dignity, freedom, ability, and responsibility must be honored. Can I stop right there? And I just want to add something to that. I have heard through the grapevine, and so this is through the grapevine, but from trusted sources, that one of the things that they're going to start attacking with the Gang of Eight is coming in and attacking you on how you share your faith while you're campaigning and while you're in office, and that's a problem, and they're going to start attacking you on that, and that's one of the tricks that they're going to play. And so I'm hoping by saying this and bringing it out right now that it shuts that down, just by pointing out that, isn't that what the Republican platform, the very first thing, is that we believe the strength of our nation lies with our faith and reliance on God, our Creator, the individual, and the family, and that each person's dignity, freedom, ability, and responsibility must be honored? Isn't that why they're there? Isn't that why we put them there? Is that because that's what, as the Republicans, we believe? So I want to point that out. But then it goes on to say, we believe that we are inheritors of a district of a distinct Western civilization, and that our traditional culture safeguards our identity as a free people. We believe in American exceptionalism. We believe in the United States of America, that it's unlike any other country on earth. We believe the United States Constitution is the greatest and most inspired document. We believe in equal rights. We believe human life begins at conception and is protected by the unalienable rights endowed by our Creator, along with the fundamental right to life, and shall not be infringed. We believe free enterprise and encouraging individual initiative has brought this nation opportunity, economic growth, and prosperity. You should go through there. People ought to read this and go. I'm not going to read every bit of it, but I just want to point out, these are the things that the AI is rating them on, how well they're voting, if they're voting for or against these principles. And
that's why I became a Republican.
Yeah.
It stood closest to what, my beliefs are.
Correct.
Well, and it was a choice, because my grandpa, I grew up in Utah, and my grandpa was a staunch Democrat. But in those days, he was what they referred to as a Rampton Democrat, because so back then, so many, the principles that he believed in and what the Democrats looked like then look more like some of the moderate leaning Republicans now. But still, it's a choice. And yes, when you read that platform and you understand how this is all supposed to work, why not? I mean, I'm not saying that you should believe the way I believe. That's not what we're saying. We're sharing our testimony of how we believe.
Amen.
And I heard the comment just recently that, the founders didn't put in the Constitution about the division of, that came later, but that the church and state need to be separate, and there needs to not be. No, that's such a misunderstanding. What that said is that the state shall not make a church.
Correct. There shall be no, Congress shall make no laws.
Yes.
Establishing
my grandparents
religion.
came from Albania, and the state told you what religion you would be. And part of why they stayed here when they came here was because they were free to choose what religion they wanted to be. And that's what that is to ensure that we don't have like the Church of England, where the president comes in and says, okay, this is going to be the state church. This is what everybody has to believe in. The Constitution provides that's that separation, but that we are guaranteed the right to worship as we see fit.
Yeah.
And by sharing your testimony, You're not stopping anybody from worshiping how they see
Not a
fit.
bit.
But you can share your testimony, and there's no, and just like the Republican Party platform and just like the Constitution, God was involved in all of that. And God should be involved in our decisions now. I continuously pray to be the messenger and not the message.
Yeah.
Because to me that's what's important is his work.
Well, and it also sets a moral standard, right? People understand that you have a more, without Christianity, you don't have the 10 commandments. Don't steal, don't lie, don't bear false witness, and don't murder. Without that, you don't have that, and it's just left up to humanity to decide. Well, what are the things that we believe we have? Well, it'd be chaos.
Well, but Shane,
And so it shows your moral standard
too. I want to qualify here also that I don't care how you worship. I don't care what religion you profess to believe in. I don't care if you worship on Tuesday morning or Sunday or what it is. We're all children of God. And I respect every individual, those who don't believe in God, those who are agnostic. I respect every person that breathes on the face of this earth for where they are right now. Right now. I don't judge on that. Where you are is where you are, and that's right where you should be right now. And God will move on you and move your heart. And it's just I share my testimony not because I'm trying to belittle anybody or make them feel less than because of what they believe. But this is where I am.
You just let people know who you are, and then they can vote accordingly. But you're not trying to tell them that they have to believe using the government to do it. Go ahead, Glenneda.
I got my blinker on. Blink, blink, blink. Well, our founding fathers, and so I wrote down a quote from John Adams because I can't remember it, but it talks about, he says that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any others. And, our founding fathers gave us an amazing document. I really don't know that we could produce something like that today. And it has been able to govern over us for going on 250 years. And the reason why they had such history is they came from that oppression. They had that experience. And so, we need to look and see that, we need to check our moral compass from time to time. Where are we at? And the platform is helps us to have that compass. If we're going to call ourselves Republican, what does that stand for? And if you've been in it for so long and you can't remember, maybe you need to reread it, on a regular basis. Our founding fathers actually read through the Bible every year. I was reading in David Barton's Founder's Bible, where he gives a lot of history, and he was sharing that, they all at least once a year read completely through the Bible, if not numerous times, just to make sure that they were staying founded and rooted on those morals that we've been created under, and what has given us such a wonderful nation. And so we need to make sure that we just kind of keep on that. So is that religious, as far as you have to be Catholic, Latter-day Saint, or Pentecostal, whatever it is? They're not saying that you have to be the one religion. They're just saying that you need to make that your moral religious people, that we're keeping our foundation rooted in the Word of God.
Yeah.
And so
your moral standard, I'm going to tie this real quick. I'm going to tie this over. Your moral standard, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if I represent the GOP platform, and these are all the things that I say I'm going to represent, then that's what I need to do. Because I'm not supposed to lie. I'm not supposed to cheat. I'm not supposed to do those. So to you, it's your Christian walk that gives you that moral standard. Now, everybody has some kind of a basis, a litmus test, a paradigm that is their compass, that is their moral standard. But what you're saying is that your moral standard says that if I represent the GOP platform, then I need to represent the GOP platform. Am I missing anything here?
No. And I take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of Idaho.
Yeah.
And again, maybe we need to go back and read those, because God is intertwined. He's woven in both of those documents. You can
Yep.
see that everywhere. And so, but again, that's that moral compass that helps us stay on track, where we're not going to bring harm to another. We're not going to oppress another. We're not going to murder the unborn. I mean, that's the moral compass. And that helps us to navigate through all of the stuff that we're dealing with.
So
Right,
let me.
because it says all men are created equal. All men.
All men.
It doesn't refer to color, gender, race, creed, nothing. All men are, and
That's
men
right.
generic as in men and women, you know, all
Correct.
beings. All men are created equal. And that's our job, is to protect that premise.
So based on that, you came up with this. The so-called Gang of Eight came up with a standard that said Idaho's budget has grown 55% in just 5 years. That's unsustainable. We need fiscal responsibility to protect taxpayers and keep Idaho independent. So starting right there, let's just pick this apart. Based on that Idaho GOP platform, anybody out there listening, does that go for or against the GOP platform as we just read it? It goes exactly in line with it. And if we continue down that line, you said, we'll fully fund maintenance budgets, which are the essential services and state-approved pay raises and stay in place. You also committed to no new employees, no unnecessary government expansion. You committed to limit growth to 1.2%, so cut waste and save nearly $1 billion. And you committed to no federal money, that Idaho is supposed to be sovereign, right alongside the Idaho GOP platform. It says that that Idaho is sovereign. So we're taking a budget pledge because Idaho needs responsible leadership, not reckless spending. I challenge anybody out there, Dorothy Moon, Heather Scott, Mike Moyle, who's supposed to be supporting this platform. Where have they gone wrong? That's the question I have. Where have they gone wrong? Show one time that the actions of the Gang of Eight, and I'm gonna get on my high horse here for just a minute. Show me one time that they voted against that platform, that they violated their oath. And if you can show me that, then you have something to talk about, because we're talking about policy. But it seems to me the only complaints that everybody have are personalities. I don't give a rip about personalities. What I want is somebody that's in there that's going to stick to policy and stick to the platform, because that's what we sent you there for, not all of this infighting and bickering. Now I'm going to step off the soapbox for a minute and let the two of you, anybody want to weigh in?
I think you covered it. I think you said it. You know, that's why we're there, and that's why we made that pledge. And to be clear, you know, I served during COVID. I was there when that happened, and I sometimes think I have PTSD from it. I'm not sure, but I decided when all of the ARPA money and all of the CARES money and everything started to come in, that money doesn't come without strings, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing the money that's going to be cut off from the feds for the after-school programs, the ESL programs, the teacher development programs, and now where is that money going to come from? But that's why 43% of our budget, I think it is federal money. That means that the federal government has 43% control over what happens in the state of Idaho. So this is the danger, and this is the perfect example. So this money comes in for these programs, and then there's a health and welfare program that ends, I think, today, where during COVID, families were given money for people to stay home and care for people. And that ends today. And this is huge, because there was a lot of fraud, and there was a lot of abuse, and there were a lot of bad things that happened with that program, but there are families who came to depend on that as well. But that's the problem. Our schools came to depend on that money that gets cut off. Our families came to depend on that federal money that can be cut off. All of this federal money can stop anytime. And then what happens? If we're going to be sovereign citizens, a sovereign state, fiscally responsible, financially stable, we have to figure it out within our boundaries, within our finances, because that rug can be pulled out anytime, like we've seen. And then what? People get hurt. People's lives are disrupted and damaged because of the reliance on federal dollars that can come and go at the signature of a pen on a piece of paper.
My first year after after my first session, when I came home, the number one question that was asked to me was, what was the biggest thing that surprised you? What was the most surprising thing to you? And my answer was, I didn't realize how dependent we were on the broke federal government to pay our budget. And then I posed the question, is that truly a balanced budget when we're depending on something that can go down any day? How do we pay our bills? How does Idaho pay their bills with half of that gone? And I had mentioned that to a few of the other legislators, and some of the response was that, we might have to go digital with the federal when that happens. Well, that's not going to happen on my watch. I will not vote for that. Let's start being responsible. Let's do like any good business owner out there that's paying their taxes. When things get tough, they start cutting back the waste. They stop cutting back the wants. You're going to have to just figure out how you're going to run into that budget. We need to start winging ourselves off of that federal dollars. It would be easier to do that, to wing ourselves off of it, than to have it go down. And then all of a sudden we're in a panic and there's chaos and we have to decide which programs we're going to triage. And so that was kind of the biggest thing that was really discouraging. And with this pledge that we took, and why I think it's so important when you have a team of people that help keep you accountable and that will link their shields with you and hold the line. I was the only one of the 8 of us on the JFAC that I was on the appropriations committee, and I was able to stand strong and vote no, because most of the time I was the only no vote. And that's really hard to be always being 1 nay, 19 yeses, and that's difficult when you're in that position. But because I had that support and because I made a pledge to my constituents, this is what I will do, I was able to hold firm and continue to do that when I was the only one most of the time. We started getting more of them that would come along and vote with me. But that's what's important about having that pledge, because I'm putting that out for everybody. Yeah. And then my teammates were putting that out there, and I had that support when I was in that committee room all by myself.
So I like to bring the receipts, and to that fact on that pledge, here is the results of that pledge. So the top rated legislators, and this is from, again, the AI that rated how well or how poorly our legislators, each legislator, voted in line with the GOP platform. The top, I just went straight through. These are the top. There's nobody in between here. These are the top off the page. You can go to the page and look at it yourself. Clint Hostetler, David Levitt, Josh Cole, Kent Marmon, Christy Zito, Lucas Kaler, Faye Thompson, Glenneda Zuiderveld. These are the gang of 8. All of the 8 top legislators in that order on that website, according to AI, who could read the bill, are out of the gang of 8. Now, this is how I showed you the leadership. But after, remember this letter? Okay, where they started to compromise? Let's take a look. The signers, the people who signed that, who are still in office. Phil Hart, C+. 77%. So a third of the time he's voting against the platform, according to this AI. Steve Tanner, 20% of the time. So 88% of the time he's in line. Heather Scott, again, 88% of the time she's in line, a B+. Dale Hawkins, 88%. You keep going down. Ben Tooze, 73%. So a third of the time voting against the platform. Josh Tanner, a third of the time voting against the platform. Joe Alfuri, 20% of the time voting against the platform. Elaine Price, 20% of the time, 15% voting against the platform. Let's be fair. Brian Lanning, 85%, 15% of the time voting against the platform. Tammy Nichols, she was one of the greats in my mind. But look what's happened when you start compromising. This is what happens. Now she's got a B rating instead of an A. Why aren't you up there as an A, Tammy? I want to know that. I consider you a friend. Why are you compromising? And then look at Carl. 60%, nearly half the time, voting against the platform. I'm not here. We didn't come here to beat up on anybody. I just want to show you the receipts. This is what happens when you start compromising when you lose your faith, when you stop trusting in God to deliver you, and you start going, oh boy, if we don't compromise and bring in Moyle and keep Moyle in there, then we might get somebody worse. Well, you know what? You might have got somebody better. And this is where it started. That was the seed of doubt that has reared its ugly head to get to where we are today, because it's all about Mike Moyle. And that, to me, from what I'm seeing, he is at the center of all of the controversy and all of this riff. And it's because you didn't hold your faith. You didn't hold strong. It's like Peter got out on the water, and at first he was looking at Jesus, and he was walking on the water right alongside him, and he took his eyes off the prize. He took his eyes off of Jesus, and he sank. And we're watching some of our legislators start to sink because they're compromising. I want you to hold your faith. Get back on the water. Get your eyes back where it's supposed to be, because that's what we sent you there for. Not all the bickering and infighting. We sent you there to go vote with the platform. I'll shut up for a second.
You know,
it's
and
the truth. It's the absolute truth. That's why we're there. And I believe we did our job. Now, can we put out a list of 62 or 70 or whatever pieces of legislation that we had our name on that got passed? No, we can't. But every one of those pieces of legislation needed our support to get passed. There's no question about that. And what's important, and when people come to me and they say, well, I'm going to run for office. I've watched you, which don't watch me just run for office, because it's the thing you should do. That's the first thing I will tell people is, if you're going to go in there and you're going to hold that conservative line. So let's talk about that Overton window here for a minute. So people tend to move moderate the longer they serve. It's just a proven fact. You can look at voting records forever, and it's just that's exactly what happens. You can see it in the last legislative session. It just happens. People move. And this happens outside of government. This is just the way it is. If you don't have a hard right goalpost, if you don't have a group of people, and it's always happened, there was a time when Mike Moyle was the leader of the hard right. There was a time when Scott Bedke showed up on the floor with a t-shirt, something about tax cuts or tax breaks. I don't remember what. He was at one time the hard right. These people have all at one time been this hard right goalpost. And if you don't have that, it allows the Overton window to move even farther left. So you have to have that. You have to have that hard right stand. The 6-pack plus one, they were that hard right. The Gang of Eight, they're that hard right. And when I'm dead and gone and in my grave, hopefully there will be another hard right that's going to hold that line so that Overton window doesn't move as far as fast.
Very well said. Glenneda.
I have nothing to add to that. That was very well said. I'm her wingman.
We're each other's wingman.
Yeah.
So
a little anecdotal story about that. My last year in the Senate, I forget what the vote was about, and I was really struggling because you can start to feel if you're not really careful, you start to feel yourself thinking, well, I really like those guys that lobbied for that, and if I vote against this, am I going to make them mad?
Well,
and it was something that you could go either way on the vote, and it wasn't. And Glenneda's in my office, and I'm lamenting about this. And she looks at me and she said, "You can't do that." And I'm like, "You don't understand. You're not sitting in this chair." And she said, "No, I understand. I see what's happening here, and you can't do that."
Yeah.
And it's that accountability, and really confrontational politics is that accountability. And she confronted me.
Good.
And that's what this is all about, is confronting each other to hold ourselves in a position. I love this saying that politics is war without blood, and war is politics with bloodshed. Because that's what it is. It's a war for the soul of our state, the soul of our country, and the soul of the people we represent.
So now I think it's a good time. And this is me, everybody out there, because this is what I do. I bring the receipts. I'm here to educate you. I want to show you who it is that they're supporting. Mike Moyle. because I think it's not I don't want to dog on people. I don't want to beat people up. That's not what I'm here. But we are talking about politics, and we're talking about your votes, and we're talking about the people who are representing you. And I think you need to understand who's representing you. When we go to the Idaho Secretary of State, this is from the Sunshine Report. It shows that Bayer, and now Bayer is, they ended up with Monsanto, okay? And if you know anything about Monsanto, you know to beware of Bayer. So this donor gave $10,000 to 5 candidates in unpack, and this was in the 2020 to 2025 session. And if you take a look at the list, I want you to look at who's on this list of people that Bayer gave to. The Idaho Prosperity Fund, Jim Rice, Mike Moyle, Patty Ann Lange, more to the Idaho Prosperity Fund, Dorothy Moon, Sage Dixon, Jim Rice. But it gets worse. So here we go. I blew it up there. I should have blown it up so you could read it, but you can see it right there. Okay, when they did it. Now, there's also PACs that they give to. And if we dig in, we'll see that Bayer gave $50,000 to Idaho Rising. They must really like Idaho Rising, but who in the world is Idaho Rising? These are the games that they play. This is the game that they play when they want to hide, okay, who's giving to them and who's giving these large amounts of money. But hey, guess what? We dig a little bit over here. And if you look over at Idaho Rising's website, you'll see that is paid for by Idaho Rising PAC look at the address, 480 North Plummer Road, Star, Idaho. Well, I did a little Google search on maps. You can go do it yourself right now. What is that address? Who's at that address? Moyle Farms. It's Moyle's PAC that Bayer gave that money to. But then it gets worse. Look at Moyle's committee chairs. Agriculture, appropriations, business, commerce, education. Look at the scores. D+, F, D-, F, C, B, D, C, C-, C-, D, B-, D+, C. These are the people that Moyle's putting in it, that they're defending the guy. They're trying to keep him in there. And these are the people that he's putting in his committee chairs. And this is how they're voting. And those committee chairs decide what bills actually get pushed to the floor. They get brought up for a vote. So this is how they voted on the ones that actually made it there. But there were good bills that they would put in a drawer and not allow to the floor. And then there were bad bills that they brought to the floor that never made it to the floor for a vote. So you don't get to see all of that. But the ones that actually made it, none of them have an A rating. And this is who they're defending. This is what's causing the whole riff, is because they want this guy, Mike Moyle, to stay in there. And I'm telling you right now, Idaho needs to get rid of him. And that's me speaking. I'll digress for a minute.
Bayer, because we always hear, the dark out-of-state money. Bayer is out of the country, literally, not even in our nation, based out of there. And then they're also their highest stockholders is BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, which is Larry Fink, who is a Democrat. And so, here they're okay with taking that money, but yet they're screaming about these small amounts that is coming out against them. And, I think people really need to realize that most of your Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry lobbyists' money, when you go and do your homework, most of them are your globalist money that has stocks where their main stockholders are BlackRock and Vanguard. And so they have that influence. And to say that lobbyists don't have an influence there, then why do they spend millions of dollars? And why do they show up at the Capitol? Bayer, this last session, they had all kinds of people. They were all in like orange vests, trying to make a, show, look here, and kind of give that impact to kind of work on the legislators so that we will vote to basically give them immunity from having any responsibility. And there's that pressure there. And if you don't have, like Christy said, that post, that far right post, that compass that's firmly in, on solid rock, you will tend to slowly give in. it's hard when you're constantly being hit over and over and over. And they're very good at what they do. That's the reason why they get paid the big bucks, is because they're very good at working on your emotions and your feelings and taking you out to dinner, and so that's what they're paid to do. And so to think that he's taking that money and they're not going to have an influence over them, they do.
Yeah. If you want to stay, if you want to get that money the next election cycle, you better toe the line. Christy?
Mhm.
Well, and I just want to point out also that the Yao people who everybody are carping about, everybody are mad about, I believe, and Glenneda can correct me if I'm wrong because it was in her area, I think they put $30,000 towards the fight to stop Proposition 1.
They did.
There are a lot of legislators in office today that are considered, liberty legislators who Yao has helped through the years. They have campaigned for them. They've knocked on thousands and thousands of doors across the state for different people, who are in office today, and their help has made a difference. So, who's going to decide whose dark money is welcome in Idaho and whose dark money is not welcome in Idaho? Who's going to be the decision maker there? That's my question. And then that's the only question, and that's probably the only thing I should say about all of this is who
And
gets
how
to
are
make that decision?
and how are they going to define it? The definition of that. And are they going to, if that's the thing, they say no dark money, how is they going to define it? And then maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise. Maybe all of that Bay or Nyack money will go away, and then it'll be, easier for conservatives to run and win. You never know. But yeah, how do you know? But it's kind of hypocritical when you keep pointing the finger at one thing, but yet there's three pointing back at yourself. And so it's a battle, but we're here to fight for the people. It's unfortunate that we even have to do this today, because there's so much work to do. There's so many things that we have to be working on for the people, and to save our state, and try to stop oppressing. The inflation is just going to start really harming the people. And here we are just spending more, and now we're getting caught up in all of this when we really need to be focusing on what we were sent for.
Well,
And that's what we've been doing.
Yes.
That's exactly what we've been doing is we have focused on the work of the people. We've focused on the platform. We focused on what people have asked of us. We have remained silent. We've not stepped into the quagmire of all of this. And I can't speak for Glenneda, but I'm here today just to simply answer questions.
Yeah.
And I hope that's what I've done, with that. And I got a little off on the God thing, but that's why we're here, is to answer these questions, because it's about policy.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, whether I'm a mom or whether I'm menopausal or whether someone's a whore or not a whore. What does that have to do with policy? And who's pulling the strings of these people? And who, people say, well, it needs to stop. It needs to stop, because in the last 2 weeks, more people have gotten involved in this defending the garbage that's being said. And people are, well, it has to stop. It has to stop. Well, who has to stop? I mean, why all of a sudden now that, we're tired of being called these names and these personal attacks, and to go after the Second Amendment Alliance and Stop Idaho Rhinos, grassroots Idaho organizations. And now that, they're coming out and saying, we haven't done anything wrong. We've been all about policy all along. Well, now it has to stop. Where does it have to stop? Who's name?
And it takes two to fight, and we chose to not engage in that. We have worked really hard to not engage in that, because we are home and we are in front of our people. They're not really interested in that. X is a very small amount of people. A lot of people don't even know what's going on. Unfortunately, they're knowing a little bit more now. But, we tried to save them from all of that, because we really are there about working hard for on the policy and fighting for them. And again, my dad used to say, it always, takes two to fight, and I'm not going to fight with you. we chose not to fight. But when it starts coming in to the point where this is the reason why we're doing this show today, is we have been silent. A lot of people they didn't have any clue of what's happening and what has led up to this. And that's the purpose of this, so that we can share what's led up to this. Let's put it behind us, and let's all move forward and start doing what we said we would do with our constituents. That's what this is all about.
Well, and you talked about some of the just disgusting terms that they've had and the things they said, the menopausal women and some of the other nasty comments. Well, that comes up. So if you're on X, you've probably heard of a couple ladies, Lauren and Brandy, and I want to bring this up. So this is Mike Moyle making a post. Great farm visit today from some of Moyle's loyals and my new Texas friends. And you'll see right there, you'll see Lauren and Brandy. And these are two individuals, I'm going to call them influencers, that have gotten on X, and they have just been pounding and pounding and pounding, just saying nasty, disgusting things about the Gang of Eight, and specifically these two wonderful senators, and then other conservatives. They've been beating up on the Idaho Freedom Foundation. They've been beating up on Dustin Hurst. They've been beating up on all of the great people that have led this conservative movement from the beginning. They beat up on Maria Nate. They beat up on Ron Nate. They're beating up on
Russ Fulcher.
They're beating up on all the people who are keeping Idaho, Idaho. And why are they doing that? But you have to wonder, when they're hanging out with Mike Moyle, you have to wonder, is he the one pulling the strings? I don't know. I don't have evidence of that. But when you see them all out there hobnobbing together, and then all of a sudden they're the ones out there that are slandering, I'm going to call it, defaming these wonderful people that are voting in line with the GOP platform, you have to wonder who's pulling the strings.
And you have to wonder too, and this is my question, why are they not going after those who do have the F and the D? You have Representative Jack Nelson, you have Representative Rod Furness, and a lot of them that are completely taking our state in the wrong direction. But for some reason, they're probably just sitting back and eating popcorn and watching all of this. Why are we not, where's the outcry against what they're doing? Why all of a sudden what we're doing is standing on our convictions and our morals and what we said we would do? Why? I would like to know why are you not looking at the rest of them? Why are they not your enemy?
And not in a personal, vile, disgusting way like they come after us.
Yeah.
But in a policy.
Yes.
Yeah, all that energy could be going into bringing out that their votes are not in line with conservative policy.
Well, see,
I mean, I don't want anybody to be disparaged or talked about the way we have been. No, I don't want that for anybody. But all of that energy, all of that, I guess energy is the best word for it, could be going into pointing out their policy votes. And it's so unfortunate that it's not. It's just so unfortunate.
Well, and Lauren and Brandy claim to be conservatives, and they claim to be Republicans. They claim to be part of that platform. So it makes you wonder. So then why aren't they calling out Mike's votes? Why aren't they calling out why aren't they calling out Tammy for suddenly starting to go down that path that we talked about, that when you've been there too long, you start sliding further and further to the left rather than standing on principles? Why aren't they calling out the policies, the policy votes, rather than getting all caught up in this personality conflict? And on that, I want to talk about Dorothy for a minute. Why? She's the chair of the GOP. She is the lady that should be out there championing the GOP platform. But instead of doing that, we have this kind of garbage.
No, that was a mistake, and that young guy made a mistake. But that's just the way it is. No, that is not the way it is. Don't sit here and make excuses for it. So anyway, Young Americans for Liberty came into the state. Some people have aligned with Young Americans for Liberty. Not the majority of the legislature.
Can you stop it right there, Shane?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to point out that Dorothy was one of the original Hazlet members and part of that. She was part of y'all and our Hazlet, because Hazlet again was the political arm of that. She was one of the original ones that they helped her in her Secretary of State race. They put out a mailer, and the reason why I know that she had gotten a mailer in my area, because they also included me, Priscilla Giddings, and Dorothy Moon on a mailer, just saying that these are strong conservative women, and they put out a mailer for that. So they spent money in her race too to help her there, and I just wanted to point that out.
That's good to point out. So this is a by the way, just in case you don't know, you haven't seen this out there already. This is an audio clip that where can you just give a little bit of a background to this? Where was this at? Do either of you know where she was saying all of this? I just know that another group posted this, and when I listened to it, I was just appalled.
Well, my understanding is it was a Republican women's meeting, and one of the people who attended the meeting had a question about grocery tax repeal. And again, I'm getting this is
Yeah.
I wasn't there, but this is what I was told because I was curious where it came from. And this woman really wanted to know. It wasn't a setup. She had no idea what was coming. She just wanted to know why the grocery tax repeal wasn't supported by the party, because it was part of the platform. And I guess she was kind of blown away by what she heard.
Yeah.
And so she shared the recording, and the recording was shared with this woman's permission, the way I understand it. And there was nothing nefarious. It wasn't a setup. It wasn't a got ya. It was maybe a shocker, but not a got ya.
And
I just wanted
apologize for the audio on that real quick. It is really low, but that's the way it was recorded. So it's hard to amplify that on this end, but go ahead, Glenneda.
And I just want to share, and I learned this from Heather and Dorothy. And when they were mentoring, they said, always speak as if you're being recorded. Always know that somebody's recording something. And then they always would tell us too, that make sure that if you're in a situation to record the conversations. So if you have to defend yourself into things that are being said. So not only do they encourage me to, make sure to speak as you're being recorded, to also record. And so this shouldn't have been a surprise for her.
No, it shouldn't at all. So let's just go ahead and just keep, and feel free to stop me if there's anything. If I can get this to go back down there where I play.
How many, we have 105, and how many of the Democrats, there's only what? 15 left? Yeah, 15 left. A majority is Republicans. So when Yale came out, Yale is confrontational politics. You make money if there's a confrontation. So
can you stop it right there?
You want grocery sales tax exemption.
Absolutely.
I have so much to say. Y'all is confrontational politics. Again, she used y'all for confrontational politics in her race. But also, if you go and you look at the Tea Party, which she was part of as well, the Tea Party uses confrontational politics. And they all, again, the governor, they use confrontational politics. So I don't know why all of a sudden this is the target when we know that it's always been about confrontational politics. And I was always told that you're gonna have to grow a thicker skin. Just grow a thicker skin. This is the way it is. Well, we all just need to grow a thicker skin and go out there and live your life and be that representative that everything that's being said is proven to be a lie.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my comment on that.
We can just keep.
That Otter ran on that. Do you know Little ran on it twice? And they don't do it because you're going to decrease the size of government by letting go all those people. But when you look at it, the grocery sales tax exemption that we get, and Heather Scott was always for grocery sales tax exemption, and so am I. Just get rid of it. Pull off the Band-Aid. We're only one of 4 states that do it. But on the grocery sales tax credit, they increased it to where you're actually getting more money back than what you would get if they...
Okay. So now we're getting into the kind of the heart of it. She's saying that they supported it, but what actually happened with it?
The grocery tax repeal?
Yeah.
It actually got, so Representative David Levitt was carrying it on the House side, and they tell us that, you know, a lot of the tax bills have to start on the House side. So he took it into Chairman, I always get them mixed up. There's a Cannon and a Gannon. So I think it's Cannon, or I can't remember who the chairman is. But anyway, he took it into him to have the to get it in front of the committee to get it heard, and it stayed in his desk for a long time. And then finally we decided that we're not going to get anywhere on the House side, and then we brought the bill over to the Senate side, and we went and talked to the Chairman Ricks and trying to get it through. But the problem is they don't really want to give the repeal. They want to just keep the tax credit. Which, you know, I guess, you know, you're getting something, you're getting some crumbs, but the true relief is it's at the register. Let's give them the relief at the register. And people say, well, they're getting just as much back. That's a false statement. And the other thing that, and so it basically just died over on the Senate side. We couldn't get it through, even though we're dealing with all the Republicans and trying to share that this is part of the resolution. This has been on almost every year at the GOP, if I'm correct here, Christy. It's a resolution every year to repeal the grocery tax, And here's another thing that people don't think about is if they were to repeal the grocery tax, we wouldn't have to have all those workers and all that setup that we have to pay that extra money because now they have to go through and deal with the Idaho state tax collections. You know, how many full-time employees are we paying to deal with that? What if we remove that? We would actually be, you know, money ahead, and people will get that money in their pocket. And but it is a resolution that's brought forward. But again, the tax credit has always been, they would just rather do that. You know, instead of letting people keep their money, they'd rather have them beg for it back.
Well, and that's the problem when you do a credit is that it has to go through the bureaucracy, and then when it goes through the bureaucracy, that costs money. The state takes it and then gives it back.
It's a moral issue.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about it, it is a moral issue. You have to have food. You can't live without food. And people say, well, grow a garden, do this, do that. Let's just get real about this. It is a very moral issue. Number one, to tax a basic necessity of life, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a very basic necessity of life. Why does the government need to take my money, keep it for a year, and then dole it back to me when I file a paper with them to get it back? And then this new business about bookkeeping for breadcrumbs, you keep your receipts, itemize them, turn them in, and then I think you get, is it $45 more, something like that?
I think it's $65 more, something.
The amount doesn't matter. The amount is immaterial. The point is that is your money. And that was such a slap in the face to the citizens of the state of Idaho, as far as I'm concerned, to expect them to bookkeep to get their money back that they work hard for, that they spend on a very basic necessity to live.
Yep.
And that's just too, let's point out too, that if they do that and they save all their receipts, that they don't fade in the sun, and they keep all of their receipts, they have to know exactly what is considered the definition of grocery. They're going to have to know that. And if they do file their taxes and have to have an accountant do it, they're going to have to pay more money to the accountant to help them get, I think it was $95 extra.
95, yes.
Yeah, they have to get that extra 95. They have to know the bookkeeping, and then they're going to have to pay a bookkeeper to do that. And the other thing that is not brought up is those who live on the borders, they will go over to Oregon and buy their groceries, and then they're going to get that tax credit as well. And so, you know, just the right thing to do morally, financially for our constituents is to let them get that relief at the cash register.
And why not? I mean, why? I can't. I think.
What difference does it make if you give it in or if you beg for it back?
Yeah.
Other than the moral issue of you shouldn't have to beg for it back.
You know, it almost sounds like somebody put together this stupid idea just to bring forth a stupid idea to delay the system long enough that everybody goes, okay, forget it. We're not going to talk about grocery taxes again this year. I mean, it's the only reason I can think of, because who would actually vote for that? It's ridiculous.
Well, and then we get a lot of pushback too. They're like, well, that's really not, I'd rather have property tax cuts. I would rather have it. I would like to have it all. In Glenn's perfect world, that's where I would be. I'd be like, hey, let's give them all their money. Let's push free market. Let's get it back to the original intent of our founding. Let's get it back to there. That would be my perfect world. But you have a lot of them say, well, grocery tax, that's the least of my problems. 87% of Idahoans want grocery tax repeal. So that little small number that is saying, oh, it's not a big deal, 87% of the people out there, it's a big deal.
Yep. Let's keep on rolling this.
Yeah, and they don't talk about
They don't talk about
You're getting more money. You're getting it all back.
But this is for people who come into the state because we're high.
They're not getting it all back.
We do get some of that.
They're not getting it all
a lot
back.
of revenue off of 26 million. Yeah, 26 million or whatever. So truth of the matter is, I was always for it too. But then Heather sat down and explained to me that with this increase, they will get it. So y'all comes into the state with the help of the State Freedom Caucus Network, and that is run by Maria Nate and her 8.
And can I stop it there?
Yep.
Young Americans for Liberty and State Freedom Caucus are completely two separate things. They are not one and the same. They do not work together. Do they have some of the same goals as far as protecting our state sovereignty, not growing government? Let's get some grocery, let's not tax the people. Yeah, they have the same goals, but they are completely two separate things.
Christy, you were laughing through that. Did you have something to add?
Glenneda said it.
Okay.
And I want to qualify so the State Freedom Caucus Network is an offshoot of the House Freedom Caucus, the federal that Raul Labrador was one of the founding members of, and it's still very active today. And you've seen some really good things come from them on the federal level with the Big Beautiful Bill. But that being said, so the State Freedom Caucus Network was developed under their umbrella. And I stood on the steps of the Georgia State Capitol Rotunda when the very first State Freedom Caucus Network was launched. Me, Ron Nate, Carrie Hanks, Greg Furch, and I think Tammy was there as well. We were there when the very first State Freedom Caucus Network was launched. And I've been to their meetings. I've been to, all of this stuff. Not one time, and this includes Yao, not one time have I ever had any member of either one of those organizations look at me and say, this is what you're going to do. But they'll look at me and they'll say, how can we help you? What's important to the people in your state? And is there anything we can do to help?
Exactly. Same testimony there for me as well. That's my experience. They want to help us assist because they know what we're fighting for in our states. And they're in all these different states. So we all have similar issues, but different issues. And so they're there to assist, not to dictate. I have not sat in one meeting where they tell us, they're like, what do you guys want to fight for? What is something that we can help you get across the finish line?
They understand
that.
You.
I'd also like to point out that we have no control over what any of these organizations do. It's just like you might be a member of a credit union, but you don't have any control over how they advertise. Or you might be a member of whatever organizations there are out there, the NRA or whatever, but you have no control over what the NRA advertises or how they run their business. None. And, so to think that, there's some sort of a big secret conspiracy here is just a fallacy.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And then before we go, because I know it was going in, I could hear Maria's name. I just want to give a little history. When we started, so Christy was at the very beginning, but when we finally got that national recognition, when the 15 of us went to DC and sat around the table there discussing and figuring out if we really wanted to become part of the State Freedom Caucus, our original director was Theo Wold until he got the job with Raul Labrador. It wasn't Maria Nate. And then when he took that job, then we had to get applications for this position. And it was a decision between the 15 of us and DC together who we wanted to hire. And Maria was the one that at that time was strongly recommended by Tammy Nichols and Heather Scott. And they were the co-chairs of that. And so that was the direction. So we all chose that. And she has been doing her job, and she is a workhorse, and she is doing what basically we both hired her to do.
Yeah. I don't know how she keeps up, but let's keep trudging this forward and get.
And her 8 people, and they started putting out really ugly, I don't know, they put out one against you. It was black and red, and it said, Barbara Ehart is a traitor. Hasn't even voted yet. Conflict. Now they're ready to get Idaho to get rid of grocery sales tax exemption. You watch us, we're Young Americans for Liberty. We're based out of Texas, we're gonna do this. They put them out against a lot of good Republicans. Okay, there's some bad ones, I get it. All of them don't vote like I would or Barbara would, and there's some bad ones. But you don't call them a traitor unless they've done something really egregious.
Thoughts there? Do we want to keep going forward?
You know what? All I have to say is get a thicker skin. I've been called way worse by my own governor, so grow a thicker skin. You're not sent there to be acting like teenagers.
Well, the political hits during the campaign season are just horrible. I hate veterans. I hate farmers. Farmed all my life. My dad's a Korean War veteran. It just
you grow a thicker skin. That's part of it. And I always say, if you can't take the heat, maybe you need to vacate the seat.
There you go.
And the other thing is not me, not Glenneda, not Maria. No one has anything to do with the advertising from Yao. We do not. They do their own thing. It has nothing to do with us. We don't tell them what to do. We don't tell them how to advertise. We don't tell them when or nothing. They're in fact, during the campaign season and even now, there is like a legal wall. We cannot be involved in that. We legally cannot be involved in that.
So
they float their own boat.
I think everybody needs to remember too, young Americans, YA. Okay, as we get older, we get wiser, we get a little more tempered, but these are young Americans. They're confrontational. Get over it. That's what they're going to do. They're on fire and they're ready to, I had a pastor that used to say that they're ready to chase hell with a squirt gun.
I like that.
And Young Americans is kind of a breakaway from the Tea Party. It's a Ron Paul thing, and again, Dorothy was part of that Tea Party. And Young Americans, is still kind of under that umbrella of Ron Paul as far as that, so, I don't understand that. So.
Yeah. And if you want Young Americans, you need to appeal to Young Americans. We need groups like Young Americans that are out there that are appealing to the younger group, to the younger voter. Look at what's happening in America today. So anyway, let's keep on this so I don't keep getting sidetracked here.
It hadn't even happened yet. So the grocery sales tax exemption was one of them. They can make money off of that. So the Gang of 8 ran with it. And then when you pit 8 Republicans, like, well, we know better than you because we're the moral authority. Yeah. And you don't, Barbara, despite everything she's done in women in sports. I'm telling you, phenomenal. But you know what I mean? And to go after Barbara and Julian. So
do you want to stop there, Christy, and talk about any of that?
Well, I don't want to get too far into the weeds of this because my purpose here today is to not stoop to that level. But I would ask why the chairwoman of the Idaho GOP would pick on 8 consistently high-rated Republicans. Why she would, like you said before, Lori McCann votes like a Democrat. Jack Nelson votes like there are plenty of people out there that you could pick on. She keeps referring to the grocery tax thing. That's part of the Republican Party platform. 87% of the people in the state of Idaho polled want that. It hurts our border cities because people who live on a Montana or an Oregon border and have the ability to Washington, they'll go to these other states and shop. In Mountain Home, we have the BX on the base. There's no state tax on a federal installation. So Mountain Home businesses lose that as well. So it does have an impact on people. When you start talking about people coming in from out of state and charging them tax on food, it's just as immoral to tax people who live in another state to buy food as it is to tax the people in your state to buy food. My only question is why would Dorothy, and I'll even take it a step further, why would Dorothy, as the leader of the Idaho GOP, go after Republicans in the way that she is?
And I'll just say too, isn't that confrontational politics?
I would
Thank you.
It is confrontational politics.
Thank you.
And
All right.
then the 8 too, you know, and it's interesting. Dorothy talks about in that where she would probably vote for the grocery tax repeal if she was a legislator. So if she was a legislator and would vote for that, why wouldn't she push it as the Idaho GOP chair?
Thank you. And why isn't she calling out those who don't want it instead of knocking the people who are for it?
But so Yale is still here, and hopefully the Gang of 8 doesn't become a Gang of 10. And the thing is,
did you hear that?
I mean,
Hopefully the Gang of 8 doesn't become the Gang of 10.
Why wouldn't she want more of us?
Why would you say that?
Yeah. I don't know, I have no answers for that. But my question would be to Dorothy, why wouldn't you want more that is pushing the Republican platform? Why wouldn't you want more of us?
You've both heard this. Is there anything else in here that do we need to keep going forward, or a couple other hot points, or are we beating a dead horse?
You know what, I can't, this is how I am. I listened to it once and now it's
Yeah.
I move on really quickly.
I don't want to belabor the thing because the recording speaks for itself. It was made totally innocent. It wasn't a gotcha moment. It's the speakers in it represent themselves. There's nothing I can say other than why.
The whole heart of it.
Good.
She summed it up right there. The whole heart of it. It wasn't to talk about grocery tax. When she got that, it was typical politician spin. Let's spin this around so we can attack Yal. Let's spin this around so we can attack the Gang of 8 and get right back to I'm mad at you because you didn't support my Mike Moyle. And that's what it boils down to behind the scenes.
I don't have anything more to say about it. I don't care if I ever hear it again.
Yeah.
And you know, and I would rather focus on the pay raise because I know you have some of the history there. And I would like to talk where this is where a lot of problems began as well is us bringing the resolution to reject our pay raise. And I would like to kind of talk on that, and maybe you can kind of share the information that you received, Shane.
Yeah, please go ahead and talk on that. Pardon me?
We're there to work on conservative principles. We're there to represent the people, and that's our focus. That's completely our focus. That's what we've stayed on point on. And I personally do not want to get into the weeds on this. I don't want to get sucked into the nastiness, no matter where it comes from. Just what is the work of the people and what can I do to further that?
Yes. So here's the, so moving forward, because again, this goes right back to there's a lot that started there, and we could go back. I mean, David Levitt did a great job of kind of summarizing some of how all of that came about. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to go all the way back there right now. But Glenneda, can you just kind of bring us up? I'm going to bring up that resolution next to you and go ahead. Talk on this for a moment.
So on that resolution, and I was in the room when they voted on that, the resolution was saying that we need to reject our pay because at that time, the leadership, and at the time it was Chuck Winder and Moyle, they brought to the Citizens Board that decides our pay. And at that time, it was a 40% increase. And through a lot of testimony that David did, and there was actually a survey done before all of that had taken place, that was created by Senator Nichols and Senator Hart, to kind of get our thoughts on a pay increase. And then it went through the Citizens Board, and at the resolution there, that was telling us that they wanted us to reject the pay until we could bring our budget down. And I can't remember the percentage, bring
Glenneda,
down our budget. And then they
I'm sorry.
also said to repeal the grocery tax.
I'm
Those
going to
were
go
the
ahead.
conditions.
Let's just take a minute and read. David did a really good job of putting this together, and he did a lot of work. He spent 2 hours. I don't want to rob that. And let me just read this. I'm just going to go ahead. Do you both have a few minutes?
Yeah, I just have to I had to plug my phone in.
That's okay. Let's just make sure that we're still. So let's just go ahead and do it. I mean, we're here. We're here to talk about this. We're here to clear the air. So let's just go ahead and clear the air and bring everybody completely up to speed. So David Levitt put this together. He's another one of our representatives out of the Magic Valley area, and he sent me an email and last night and at 9:00 at night. And it said, I wanted to share with you the full background on the Idaho legislative pay raise issue and the early opposition Josh Cole and I took against it. And then there was a Rumble link. If you want to go to that, you can look at the screen there, go type all that into your browser. You can go do the Rumble link. We're not going to do that today. But he said, attached, you'll find a Word document that outlays it. So he gives me a Word document, and then he also gives me some other files. And just to give me, and he says, this is the full context for everything that's unfolded since. It's also the foundation behind the attacks against me and the rest of the Gang of Eight. I'm committed to telling the truth about how the system works and to showing Idahoans what happens when you choose to stand firm instead of playing political games. Let me know what you think after reviewing it. And then he sent me the receipts. And you know me, if you've been paying attention to True Idaho News or Shane Talks Politics, when I had that in the past, you know I like the receipts. And he sent me a lot of them. And I went through them. I was up till 3 o'clock this morning getting all of this. So let me just read, because from what I know, this is 100% accurate. In 2024, a survey quietly circulated amongst the Idaho legislators. Framed as anonymous feedback, it asked whether lawmakers felt overworked, underpaid, and undersupported during the interim months. What few citizens realized was that the survey was crafted and distributed by 2 sitting senators, Phil Hart and Tammy Nichols. It was their survey, not an objective data point, that laid the rhetorical foundation for what would become one of the most controversial and politically revealing decisions of the legislative session. The questions in their survey leaned heavily towards a conclusion that Idaho's part-time legislature needs to be professionalized. Senator Hart would later testify before the Citizens Committee on Legislative Compensation, claiming that legislators worked about 20 hours per week outside of the session and that better pay would empower them to focus more on public service. Well, let me tell you something. If you need your pay to focus on public service, you're in it for the wrong reason, but I'll keep going. This survey, paired with the coordinated messaging, set the stage for a significant push to increase legislative pay. On October 4th, 2024, the Citizens Committee on Legislative Compensation held its first public hearing at the Capitol. Speaker Mike Moyle and Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder both spoke in favor of raising legislator salaries by tying them to 40% of Idaho's average household income. The proposal also sought to eliminate meal per diem by folding it into the base pay. Though the motion failed that day, the committee agreed to reconvene on November 6th. Just 1 day later, on October 25th, liberty-minded candidates David Levitt and Joshua Cole appeared on Clicks 1310 with Bill Colley. Both men publicly rejected the raise on the air, pledging not to accept it if they were elected. Their position was clear. Idaho legislators should not be increasing their own compensation while Idaho families struggled with rising costs and tax burdens. And I agree, by the way. On November 6th, the committee reconvened and adopted a final motion to raise the base legislative salary from $19,913 to $25,000 per year, a 22% increase. Who gets a 22% increase a year? What is it, about 3% if you're lucky in your job? Representative-elect David Levitt testified via Zoom and formally opposed the raise. His objection was recorded in the official minutes and later quoted in the press. Quote, I believe it sends a wrong message to our taxpayers to fund lawmaker raises, Levitt said. We should be focusing on saving taxpayers' money. Despite his warnings, the raise was approved and scheduled to take effect on December 1st, 2024. Before the 2025 legislative session even began, the Idaho Republican winter meeting for 2025 was held, and party members adopted Resolution 2025-13. The resolution declared opposition to the legislative pay raise and called for no salary increases until the legislature passed a conservative budget and repealed the grocery tax. So no raise until you get rid of the grocery tax. The group of 8 legislators, Christy, Zito, Glenneda, Zuiderveld, Joshua Cole, Clint Marmon, Lucas Kaler, Faye Thompson, Clint Hostetler, and David Levitt had already been meeting regularly. Even before the winter meeting, they had agreed to pursue a repeal of the grocery tax as one of their shared legislative priorities. Following the adoption of Resolution 2025-13, they publicly reaffirmed their commitment to reject the legislative pay raise and press forward with tax relief, working for Idaho's citizens instead of themselves. What a concept. Known informally as the Gang of Eight, their stand would define the political battle ahead. In early January, so this is where it started, guys. In early January, Representative Levitt and his intern, Matt Feemster, met with Speaker Mike Moyle to discuss policy proposals. Pay attention to this, folks. Pay close attention to this. They met with Mike Moyle to discuss policy proposals unrelated to the pay issue. During that meeting, Moyle brought up Levitt's public opposition to the raise and warned that several legislators, including members of the Freedom Caucus, the Moyle Caucus, were upset. Moyle said that any bill introduced by Levitt would likely not receive support or even be heard. So because they took a stand, we're going to retaliate and make sure that any bill that has your name on it won't even be heard. Then came the formal legislative push to stop the pay raise. Under Idaho law, legislators cannot vote to give themselves a pay raise, but they can reject a raise approved by the Citizens Committee on Legislative Compensation. The only way to do so is through a concurrent resolution passed by both chambers. On January 16th, Senate Concurrent Resolution 101 was introduced in the Senate by Senator Christy Zito for that purpose. It passed the Senate by voice vote the next day and was transmitted to the House. But instead of hearing the resolution, House leadership pivoted. On January 21st, the House Ways and Means Committee introduced a symbolic countermeasure, House Concurrent Resolution 4. This resolution did not reject the raise, but allowed lawmakers to voluntarily donate their salary increases to the state's tax relief fund. The procedure used to advance HCR 004 was deliberately unorthodox. It was introduced and numbered in the same committee meeting, then sent directly to the second reading calendar without any public testimony or standard committee process. They just zoomed that one right on in there. This maneuver was widely viewed as a vindictive move, orchestrated by Speaker Moyle and House leadership to deflect attention from SCR 101 and to poke fun at those who had taken a principled stand. It was political sleight of hand, a textbook case of misdirection in place of honest debate. On January 23rd, the resolution passed the House 61-7. 5 Republican no votes were the House members of the Gang of Eight. So the 5 no's were the 8. They stood strong that were in the House. Representative Levitt, one of those 5, made a motion to send HCR 004 to general orders and replace it with a full grocery tax repeal, which is what they promised to do. That motion failed. Meanwhile, on January 22nd, SCR 101 was quietly tabled in the House Ways and Means Committee. Only Representative Jaron Crane voted against tabling it. The resolution to reject the raise was effectively buried, and the House was denied a floor vote. In the end, the 22% raise took effect. The Republican Party had taken a position. The Gang of Eight had honored it, but House leadership, Mike Moyle, had other plans. They didn't just defeat the opposition, they ridiculed it, and they replaced it with a performative gesture that moved on as if nothing had happened. So, there you are. And that's how nasty politics are in Idaho. It's not just Washington, D.C., folks. It's happening right here in Idaho, and there it is. Go ahead.
David shares all the facts and the truth. Can't say anything better, but this is what I do want to say. Let's put this all behind us. Let's start fighting for the people. Let's start working for the people. Let's start serving the people that we were elected to do. We need to put this behind us. Let it, they say, let it stop. It's stopping here. You will not hear something from me on this matter and these things that are going on. You will not hear me tweet, post, anything, because I am moving forward. This is a time that we're sharing what's going on, and now we're going to continue to fight. And I encourage those to join us, and let's show Idaho that we can be that conservative people that they put into the legislative seats.
Christy?
When stuff like this happens, what we witnessed at the beginning of the legislative session last year and some of the antics that are not new, that have always happened, the only people that really suffer are the people, the citizens of the state of Idaho. I have a thick skin. You can say what you want about me in the halls of the Capitol, stuff said by other legislators, stuff said publicly, press releases from the Senate caucus and stuff. I don't care. It hurts the people of the state of Idaho when these shenanigans happen. And I'm not there to spar with the other legislators. I'm not there to get caught up in the pettiness and the games and even the pettiness on social media. I'm there to do the work of the people. I'm there to ensure that your money's well spent. I'm there to ensure that we are not taken over and gobbled up by federal funding and federal dollars, strings, and control that come into our state. I'm there to ensure that you remain free to live your life as you see fit. That's my job, and that's why I'm there.
Very well said. We are going on 2 hours, senators. I made a personal decision last night that I was not going to hold this to an hour. We were just going to go as long as it took to get to the bottom of this and to let you, the people, know what's going on. Bring the receipts, not just throw empty words, slander people and dog people. But if anybody got negatively spoken against, it wasn't them as a person. It was their actions. It was their policies. It was their personality conflicts. It was what's causing all of this. And so that was my intent. Let's bring this on. Let's go ahead and bring Christy and Glenneda on here so that they can speak. I know their hearts. I know that's where their hearts are at. So we're at 2 hours. But before we go, I'm going to wrap things up. But I want to give each of you an opportunity. Do you have anything else that you would like to say before we sign this off today?
You want to go alphabetical?
Whoever wants to start.
I'm just about the work of the people. That's what I've always been. These games and shenanigans, I've witnessed them from the very beginning of my service in the legislature. I've often said, if people really knew what happened behind the scenes, if people really knew what was lurking behind the smiles from legislators on the floor and their flowery campaign promises and stuff, they would be absolutely shocked. However, that's not why I'm there. I don't care that it happens. I've lived through it. I've survived it, and I'll survive it again. I want to get on with the work of the people. I want to do those things that we've promised that we would do and just serve the people in the best way that I can. That's all I'm there for, and that's all I have to say. And that I am grateful for the support of the people, and I am grateful for their input, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to get to know as many people that I have in our state and to listen to them and hear their complaints and see what happens to them in their lives and to be able to, if nothing else, to offer, moral support. And so many times, I'll just mention this, to pray with them when they're at their very lowest point. And people are so grateful to just know that someone cares and that someone will listen to the challenges that they're facing. And I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Glenneda.
Yep. I just want to say that we have done so many wonderful things and things that don't get noticed and seen. I have a canvas in my office, and it says the Government Code of Ethics. On number 9, it says that we will expose corruption wherever detected. So not only are we there to write bills and pass the budget and all that stuff, but we're also there to expose the corruption. And I want to just give a shout out to Raul Labrador for just sticking to his guns, because after talking to a lobbyist when they came into my office, I always share that with them, that's what I'm about. And he came back into my office with a file, and at that time it was $10 million of misappropriations. And we went through, with the help of Idaho Freedom Foundation, getting an article out, getting the AG engaged in this. There has been a lot of battles behind the scenes trying to get this where they can go in and investigate it. And he finally, through the Supreme Court, has now gotten the permission to go in and investigate these line items. That 10 million is now up to $72 million of misappropriations. That's part of our job. And we should be, every single legislator there, it should be their door open to anybody who wants to whistleblow on the information that they find that's going on with the government. I also had the college in Pocatello, there was misappropriations. And we have to start fighting it, because if we don't know what's going on, and it's hard to know, and then it's very hidden, it's not as easy, to go and get all this information. It's by design. But when somebody comes forward, that's also part of our job to save those dollars. And so we're there as the 8 of us. We're pledging to be those people that are going to vote right. We are not going to grow government, and we're going to try to get ourselves off the federal government. We're going to try to expose the corruption wherever it's detected. And this 8 here, they're all, Christy is the senior, and then you have me, basically the sophomore, and then the rest are freshmen. They were amazing as freshmen. I was so impressed with them using the rules, putting themselves out there, that their courage and their boldness was just amazing. And I just have to say that next session, they got their first year out of the way, and we are going to fight hard for Idaho citizens. We will not back down. We've linked shields. We're going to hold our ground, and we're going to fight. And so that's all I have to say, and I'm ready to move forward.
I just want to add one more thing.
Please.
The gang of 8 is not an exclusive number.
We're really hoping it
just happened to be that way. There are other legislators that will fight just as hard as we are.
Yeah.
There's just no question about it. There are good people in the legislature, and we've proven that because a lot of good legislation got passed this last year.
Absolutely.
It really did. And so, we're not excluding anybody. We're not picking on anybody. We just happen to be the 8 that coalesced together, and we got tagged with that name. And again, it's that goalpost on the right that somebody has to hold so that we don't move as far left.
Yep.
Well,
I'm hoping in Glenn's perfect world will be the gang of 105.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
I own it and wear it proudly. Back during COVID, when I was fighting against all the garbage, I got there was a hashtag, loudmouth Shane, and I said, let's bring it on. I love it. And I just kept talking. I even started putting that hashtag underneath some of my videos. So you know what? It's a good name. I'd wear it proudly. So ladies, senators, I cannot thank you enough for coming on here and doing this. I can't thank you enough for the service and what you do and what you put up with. I know, Glenneda, you and I talked a little bit, and I know this has been taxing on both of you to the point where you wonder if you're making a difference. Well, if you can read the comments, go back to the comments and read them. You're making a difference. There's a lot of folks that have commented today. I don't have time to get in and read all of them. I would love to read them. But you have so much support, and we need people like you who are willing to shoulder the hard times, and in order to bring Idaho back to its conservative roots and keep us there. And both of you are doing your job. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I heard one time that if Satan's not attacking you, if you're not under attack, beware. It means maybe you need to look at your own life and look at the road that you're on. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, that's the people that Satan wants to attack. They don't want you there. He doesn't want you doing what you're supposed to be doing. If he's not attacking you, you're right where he wants you. So hold the line, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a wonderful job. And now I'm going to give.
And I just want to thank you, Shane. You were a big part of this too, to have a platform to be able to share that. Thank you for everything that you do, just not for our state, but here locally. Thank you so much. And thank you for all those people that are willing to just allow us to share what's going on. we love you and we feel your love. And so that's what keeps us going.
Amen.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Shane. And thank you to all of those people, who continue to support us, who, are not getting caught up, who see through the vileness. And, that's important. It really is. And I'm personally just so grateful. And thank you, Shane. Thank you all. And God bless everyone. And may God hold our state and our country in his hand and get us where we need to be.
Okay, don't tune out late yet, because I have a couple closing things that I want to throw in here and some questions that I have that I would love for somebody to come on and answer. So this is me speaking, not our senators now. I've got just a couple things I want to bring up. So this is directed to Dorothy Moon. After listening to the video, listening to the audio, looking at what's going on, and seeing that she is on a grand tour around the state to knock the Gang of Eight, I have some questions for you. Coming right out of that video, you're supposed to be the chair of the GOP. You're supposed to be holding our state together, our Republican Party together, and upholding the values that we put representatives in there to uphold. So after listening to this and going through all this last night, I just had a couple questions that I have. First of all, why are you focused on personality conflicts while the bigger issue for Idaho voters is policy conflicts? Feel free to come on here and comment down in the comment section. Everybody can go in there and see your comments. Feel free to jump in there. I won't delete them. Take a look at it. Why are you so focused on personality conflicts rather than policy? Because your job is to worry about policy. Number two, you're railing against Yao for being involved with confrontational politics, but why are you running around the state creating more confrontation instead of working to resolve it? Don't you think isn't that what the people want of their chair of the GOP? Isn't that what the Republicans want? Is someone, we're going to have personality conflicts. Personality conflicts happen. But instead of fueling the fires and throwing gasoline on it, I expect you to work with these people and try to bring them back together for the good of the state instead of whatever it is that you're out there doing this for. I don't have any clue. I can't even imagine for 2 seconds why you're doing what you're doing. So feel free to answer that question down in there. Number three, isn't it your duty to strengthen the Republican Party instead of divide it? If we are not united, instead we're divided, we're going to go purple the way of all of the states right on down the West Coast. We're going to become another one of them. You have the what's the word I'm looking for? The unique opportunity as the chair of the Republican Party to put a stop to this mess, to get everybody on the same page, to say, let's stop worrying about all of this pettiness and let's get it fixed. But instead, you're trying to get rid of the people who are actually voting in line with the platform, and you're trying to uphold the people who are voting against it. So do your job. Number four, why don't you want more strong conservative legislators instead of less of them? Do I need to go back and play that again? We don't want to have the Gang of 10. We want to have the Gang of 8. Why? They're the only ones that are voting that have an A record on voting in line with the platform. Why don't you want more of them? Why are you trying to get against them? What is your hidden agenda? What is it that's driving you, Dorothy, to go this route? And I consider you a friend, so I'm not over here railing on somebody just because I consider you a friend, and I'm pissed. Excuse my language, but I'm not happy. I want some answers to these questions. And lastly, shouldn't you be more focused on getting representatives to vote more in line with the Idaho Republican platform instead of attacking those who already are? Why aren't you coming out speaking out against Mike Moyle? Why aren't you speaking out against Kelly Anthon and his voting record? Why aren't they the center of your focus? Why the Gang of 8? Because as far as I can tell, the Gang of 8 is doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing, which is why I'm supporting them. And also for you, Lauren and Brandy over there, why aren't you speaking out against those who are voting against the platform instead of dogging those and just being nasty and terrible, horrible people towards them? If you want to keep Idaho red, if you want to keep Idaho on track, I admonish all of you Stop this garbage and get yourself on track. Take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you helping the Republican platform or are you hurting it? Because I can tell you right now, you are destroying it, and you will single-handedly bring us down if you don't stop. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you, everybody, for staying in here. Please share this out because they took their time to come on here. And once again, thank you, senators,